The road was empty, the dust heavy in the air, and the sun beat down on a little girl no one wanted. Barefoot, starving, and too weak to cry, she collapsed on the trail, where even strangers turned their eyes away. She had no family, no name, anyone cared to remember, just a body fading into the dust of a merciless land. And as the vultures circled high above, it seemed her story would end there, forgotten, like so many before her. But then hooves echoed across the barren plain. A lone rider appeared against the dying sun. He was the wealthiest cowboy in the county, a man who had everything money could buy, yet carried a sorrow no fortune could erase. When his eyes fell upon the orphan girl in the dust, something inside him shifted forever. He could have ridden past, he could have left her like the world already had, but what he chose to do in that moment would ignite a story so powerful, so heartbreaking, it shook every soul who heard it. This is not just a tale of wealth or poverty. This is a story of mercy, of fate, and of a single choice that changed lives forever. The sun hung low over the wide plains, painting the sky in strokes of orange and red, while the wind carried with it the bitter sting of dust. Along that lonely trail, where travelers rarely passed and silence often outlasted voices, a girl no older than 12 struggled to keep her small body upright. Her feet were bare, blistered, and coated with dust, her dress torn in places where thorns and rocks had cut through the thin fabric. She had no name anyone cared to remember, no family who would come searching for her. To the world, she was nothing but an orphan left behind like a discarded scrap of life. Every step she took was heavy, her little frame trembling with exhaustion. She had not eaten since dawn, and before that, days had been filled with scraps, begged from strangers or stolen from careless hands. Her lips cracked, her throat dry. She tried to swallow but found nothing left inside to quench the fire. The trail stretched endlessly before her, and for the first time she wondered if perhaps this road would be her grave. She paused in the middle of the dusty path, falling to her knees, her hands pressed against the rough earth. A memory flashed before her eyes, a mother's voice, soft and gentle, though she could not remember the face. It had been too long, the world too cruel, and those voices of comfort had faded into echoes she could no longer reach. She was utterly alone. The sound of hooves echoed in the distance. At first, she thought it was her mind playing tricks, the way thirst sometimes conjures mirages in the desert. But no, it grew louder, steady, purposeful. She lifted her head with the last ounce of strength she had, eyes burning against the dust. On the horizon, a dark silhouette rode closer, tall and commanding, framed by the sinking sun. Fear surged through her body. She had been warned of men who roamed these trails, men who looked at abandoned girls not with mercy but with hunger. She thought of running, but her legs gave way beneath her. She collapsed into the dust, her small hands clutching at the ground, as if it could hold her safe. The rider drew closer, and as the hooves thundered just a few feet away, the girl dared to lift her eyes. What she saw made her heart pound harder than ever before. It was a man unlike any she had seen. His hat was broad, shadowing sharp features etched by years of hardship and triumph. His coat was clean, his boots polished, and the horse he rode was a magnificent beast of rich chestnut color, muscles rippling with every stride. Everything about him spoke of wealth, of power, of a life far removed from the misery that had become her world. The wealthy cowboy reined in his horse, staring down at the fragile figure sprawled in the dirt. He could have kept riding, could have looked away as so many had before. Yet something in the sight of that child stopped him cold. He dismounted slowly, the dust rising around his boots as he approached. The girl flinched, her eyes wide with terror, as though she expected a blow, but the man did not strike. He crouched down, his shadow stretching across her tiny frame, and in that moment the trail held its breath. "Little one." His voice was deep, steady, carrying both strength and a gentleness she did not expect. "What are you doing out here alone?" The girl could not answer. Her throat was too dry, her words lost in the storm of fear and despair. She tried to speak, but only a faint whimper left her lips. Tears welled in her eyes, streaking lines. Through the dust on her cheeks the cowboy studied her silently, and in his gaze was something she had not seen in a long time. He reached into his saddlebag, pulling out a canteen. With careful hands, he offered it to her. She hesitated, unsure if this was kindness or a trap, but thirst overwhelmed caution. She grasped the canteen with trembling fingers and drank the water spilling down her chin, each drop a gift of life. The man did not rush her. He watched as her breathing steadied, her shoulders lifting just slightly as if a faint spark had returned to her soul. He had seen many things on the frontier: cattle rustlers, storms that ripped across the land, men who fought over dust and pride, but nothing cut him deeper than the sight of a child abandoned to die in the dirt. When she finally lowered the canteen, her voice cracked out, barely audible. "They left me." The cowboy's jaw tightened. He didn't ask who. He didn't ask why. He already knew enough. The West was filled with cruelty, and children like her were the easiest to cast aside. He looked at her again, this time not as a stranger on the road, but as a soul caught in the claws of fate. And in that instant, something within him shifted. He lifted her gently into his arms. She was light, far too light for her age, her body fragile as though it might break with a wrong move. She clung to him instinctively, her face pressed against his chest, and though her voice shook, she whispered, "Don't leave me." The cowboy closed his eyes, a storm rising inside him. He had built his fortune with hard work, sweat, and relentless grit, but what was wealth if it could not change even one broken life? He had lost much in his past, more than the world ever guessed, and perhaps it was no accident that the trail had led him here, to this child who needed him as much as he needed purpose. He looked down the road, endless and uncertain, then at the girl in his arms. "I won't," he murmured, his voice like a vow carved into stone. The horse shifted restlessly, the sky darkening as the first stars pierced the twilight. Somewhere in the distance, coyotes howled, the sound sharp and haunting. But the cowboy stood firm, holding the orphan girl as though nothing in the world could take her from him now. What neither of them knew, as the night crept over the land, was that this single act, this moment on a dusty road, would stir echoes far beyond their lives. Because when the wealthiest cowboy stopped, when he chose mercy over indifference, the story did not simply begin. It began to shake souls, unravel secrets, and set in motion a fate neither of them could have imagined. And as the trail stretched before them, silent and waiting, the girl's heartbeat slowed against his chest. For the first time in years, she felt safe. For the first time in years, she believed someone might actually keep their promise. But the West was never a place of simple endings, and the path ahead held shadows that would test every vow he had spoken. The trail was silent as the cowboy stood holding the girl, the echo of her faint whisper still burning in his chest. "Don't leave me." His promise hung heavy in the twilight, more binding than any oath he had ever taken. With careful hands, he lifted her onto his horse, wrapping a blanket around her frail body. She leaned against him, her head resting on his chest, as the powerful animal carried them forward through the dark. The ranch came into view hours later, its wide pastures stretching beneath the pale moonlight. The house was grand compared to others in the territory: white fences, tall barns, corrals filled with horses worth more than most men made in a lifetime. The cowboy, known across counties as the wealthiest rancher, had built this empire through grit and sweat. Yet for all his riches, the house inside was cold, silent, and empty. That night, when he carried the orphan girl across the threshold, the silence broke. The housekeeper, a weathered woman named Clara, who had worked for him since his youth, gasped when she saw the child in his arms. "Lord have mercy, where did you find her?" she whispered. "On the trail," the cowboy answered, his voice low but resolute. "Left to die." Clara's eyes softened. She hurried to fetch broth and clean clothes. The girl was bathed, fed, and laid to rest in a bed softer than anything she had ever touched. She clutched the blanket with small, trembling hands, as if afraid it would vanish. Sleep took her quickly, but the cowboy remained at her side, watching the rise and fall of her breath, as if to assure himself that she was real. That night, memories haunted him. He had once held another child, his own, long ago, but fate had not been merciful then. He had buried both his wife and their newborn daughter before he built the empire that made him wealthy. He had sworn never again to open his heart, never again to feel the pain of losing what he could not protect. Yet now, a frail orphan had torn down walls he had built with iron. Morning came with the call of roosters and the first glow of dawn, spilling over the plains. The girl woke slowly, her eyes wide, as she gazed around the room, bewildered. For a moment, she seemed ready to flee, but then her gaze fell upon the cowboy sitting quietly by the window. "You're still here," she whispered. "I told you," he said with a faint smile. "I won't leave you." Her lips quivered, and though she tried to speak, only tears came. She had lived too long in a world of broken promises to trust easily, but something in his voice was different. Something in his eyes told her this man did not speak lightly. Days turned into weeks. The girl, who eventually shared her name as Leela, grew stronger under the roof of the ranch. Clara became like a grandmother, fussing over her meals and braiding her hair. The cowboy taught her to ride a pony, her laughter ringing out across fields where once only silence lingered. For the first time in years, she tasted the sweetness of belonging. But whispers began to spread. In town, folks muttered about the wealthy rancher who had taken in a nameless orphan. Some called it charity, others questioned his intentions. Greedy men speculated that the girl might be a burden who would one day stake a claim to his fortune. Jealous neighbors sneered, unable to understand why the richest man in the county would tie himself to a child with nothing. One evening, as the sun melted into the horizon, a rider appeared at the ranch gate. He carried himself with arrogance, a cruel smirk playing on his lips. He was the foreman of a nearby spread, known for his greed and sharp tongue. He dismounted and called to the cowboy. "I hear you picked up trash from the trail," he sneered, nodding toward the house where Lila was peeking from behind a curtain, an orphan with no name, no family. "Best throw her back where you found her before she brings trouble." The cowboy's eyes darkened. He stepped closer, his voice steady but sharp as a blade. "That girl is under my roof now, and as long as she is mine to protect. Speak of her again with disrespect, and you'll regret it." The foreman spat in the dirt, muttering as he mounted his horse, but his words lingered in the air, and Lila, though young, had heard enough to feel the sting. That night she sat by the fire, silent, her eyes distant. "Do you regret finding me?" she finally asked, her voice barely audible. The cowboy knelt beside her, taking her small hands into his. "No, child. The trail gave me back something I thought I lost forever. You've brought life into this home again. Don't ever think you're a burden." Her tears spilled freely, and she threw her arms around him. In that moment, she no longer felt like an orphan. She felt chosen, but the peace did not last. Weeks later, as a storm raged across the plains, riders arrived at the ranch, not neighbors, but men hardened by lawless ways. They claimed the girl belonged to them, that she was sold off and left when she became too weak to work. Their leader waved a paper, demanding she be returned. The cowboy's blood boiled. He knew lies when he heard them, but the law in those parts often bent to the highest bidder, and these men had their claws in every corner. If he refused, they threatened to burn his ranch to the ground. Lila clung to him, terror in her eyes. "Please, don't let them take me," she begged. He looked down at her, then back at the men, his jaw set like stone. "This child is mine now," he said, his voice carrying above the thunder, "and you'll have to go through me to touch her." The standoff stretched in the storm, lightning splitting the sky. The men growled, promising they'd return with force. As they rode away, the cowboy tightened his hold on Leela. He knew the battle ahead would be brutal. Wealth had given him power, but it would be tested like never before. That night, as Lila slept curled against him, the cowboy stared into the flames of the hearth. His fortune could build fences and buy cattle, but it could not shield them from every cruelty the world threw their way. Still, he vowed silently, whatever it cost, whatever storm came, he would not let her be taken, because in that dusty road where he first found her, fate had written a story greater than his own wealth. A story not of riches or power, but of a bond so fierce it shook the souls of all who saw it. And though the world would try to tear it apart, he knew this tale had only begun. The storm passed, but its shadow lingered. Each day after, the cowboy prepared quietly. He strengthened the fences, readied the horses, and kept his rifle polished. Clara prayed in whispers at night, while Lila clung to him as though letting go meant vanishing back into the darkness. He told her to be brave, but inside, he feared losing her more than he had ever feared death. Days later, the men returned. Dust rose on the horizon as 6 riders galloped toward the ranch. Their faces were hard, their voices filled with threats. "Hand her over," their leader snarled, "or we'll burn you out and leave nothing but ashes." The cowboy stepped forward, his broad frame lit by the fire of the setting sun. Behind him, Lila stood trembling, clutching Clara's hand. He placed a hand over his holster, but his eyes burned with something stronger than weapons. "You call her nothing," he said, voice steady as steel, "but she is my child now, and I'd rather die here than let you take her." The riders laughed, spitting curses, but something in his stance made even their leader hesitate. He was not just a man with money. He was a man with purpose, a man who had lost before and would not lose again. The standoff grew heavy. Lila, unable to hold back, stepped forward, her small voice breaking the silence. "Please, don't take me. I'll be good. I'll work. Just don't make me go back." Her words, raw and trembling, cut deeper than any bullet. Even hardened men shifted uneasily. For a moment, the leader faltered, but greed pushed him forward. He raised his hand to signal the charge. The cowboy drew his weapon, faster than their eyes could follow. The shot rang out, not to kill but to warn, splintering a post beside the leader's horse. The beast reared, nearly throwing its rider. The cowboy's voice thundered over the chaos. "Leave now, while you still can. This land, this child, are under my protection. Cross me again, and you'll answer not just to my gun, but to every soul in this county who knows justice when they see it." The men muttered among themselves. They had expected an easy prize, not a wall of iron. One by one, they turned their horses, cursing as they rode back into the dark. The leader glared, but even he knew the fight was lost. Silence returned, broken only by the sound of Lila's sobs. She ran to the cowboy, throwing her arms around him, burying her face against his chest. He dropped his rifle, kneeling to hold her, his own eyes burning. "It's over," he whispered, voice rough. "No one will take you from me. Not now, not ever." In that moment, wealth meant nothing. Titles, land, cattle all faded into dust compared to the fragile life in his arms. The richest man in the county had found treasure not in gold, but in the heartbeat of a child who believed in him. From that day on, folks no longer whispered about the orphan girl. They spoke of the bond that turned a wealthy cowboy into more than a rancher. They spoke of the night when his stand shook every soul who heard of it, and as seasons passed, the girl once left in the dust grew into a woman with fire in her spirit. Her story forever bound to the man who stopped on a lonely road and chose love over indifference. The trail had given her despair, but the cowboy had given her life, and together they proved that sometimes a single act of mercy could echo louder than 1,000 fortunes. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more incredible tales that stir the soul. Hit the notification bell so you never miss a story that will move you, inspire you, and leave you in awe. Thank you for watching and being part of our journey. Your support means the world, and every view helps us share more stories that matter.